I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Janine Chastain. We're collaborating on curated conversations to explore how the industry of architecture is changing.
Together, we'll find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects.
Welcome to Practice Disrupted.
Hello, listeners. Hello, Janine.
Hey, Evelyn. Hey, Disruptors. Today, we're welcoming Jeames Hanley and Christina Diego onto the show to help us dive further into a conversation at the intersection of technology, mentorship, and practice. With enhanced dependency on technology, what is an architecture firm's responsibility and role in educating staff on various digital skills? James and Christina are going to join us from Gray Pucksand, an Australian-based architecture firm, and will help us kind of unpack and discuss the realities at play in practice.
As a digital technologist and strategist in the AEC industry, James leads digital transformation and champions cultural change within architectural practices in the face of a technological shift.
And Christina graduated in the middle of COVID after earning her Bachelor of Interior Design. She's part of their interior design team at Gray Pucksand and is going to help us understand the learning curve and experience that new graduates face once joining a practice. So we're going to jump into it. James and Christina, welcome to the show. And let's start by having you both tell us a little bit about who you are and your role at the firm.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. So my name is Jeames Hanley. My role at Gray Pucksand is essentially the digital practice manager. So we work across I work across 4 studios, basically leading their strategy in terms of technology implementation across the company. So that's across all 4 studios. And when we talk about technology, that is anything from IT, servers, SharePoint, online, cloud, right back down through to how do we get a conceptual mass from SketchUp to Revit. So it's sort of across maybe 20, 30 tools that our designers would use, all the way through to the infrastructure those tools run on, as well as the hardware. So ordering laptops, make sure they're spec'd properly for virtual reality headsets. It's also looking down the track as well. So there's a lot of talk lately about the metaverse. How does that fit into architectural practices? There are big firms out there that are diving into that area. Is that something we need to be ahead of? There's a lot of talk lately, and it's been popping up everywhere on Twitter and LinkedIn around platforms like Midjourney. And what does artificial intelligence sort of have, or how does that fit into architectural practice? So looking at all of those things, as well as making sure that just day to day our digital systems run efficiently for our staff and our projects.
Awesome. I wish my intro was that long, but I'm Christina. I am a graduate interior designer with Gray Pucksand. I started about October last year. And since then, I've just kind of been dabbing in different projects with education, workplace, commercial, and yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, especially so early in the morning. So what should our listeners know about Gray Pucksand from, James, you mentioned there are 4 studios, but why don't you tell us how much staff is across all the studios, what makes you unique? And Christina, being so relatively new to the profession, I would even say, what attracted you to Gray Pucksand as kind of your first full-time role coming out of school?
Sure. I'll jump in. So as I mentioned, we've got the 4 studios. So we're down the east coast of Australia. So Brisbane or Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Canberra as well. So Canberra, we were in a fortunate position to open a new studio at the height of COVID. That's how busy the industry is down here. We have sort of really grown quite quickly over the last few years. So we're sitting around about that 140 mark at the moment in terms of staff. And we specialise in sectors such such as education, commercial, and workspace, as well as sort of pushing into that health and science and health sector as well. So I kind of like to say that we're a big, small company. I am very fortunate to be able to sort of travel around to all the studios, and it just feels like one big family. There's no one sitting off in a corner in an office. Like, you can get along with everyone from your managing director right back to your graduates as well, which is really cool. So, and I think it's a really supportive practice. We really support people that come in and say, hey, I actually haven't got a lot of site experience. I want to spend more time on site, or actually I want to learn more about computational design. If you put your hand up, it's the one practice that I really feel like you get support for what your passion is, and they help you sort of weave that into your day job, which I think is amazing.
I couldn't agree more. When I graduated, I was looking into a ton of different firms, and I really was afraid to go for a bigger company just because I was scared to get like cookie cuttered into like one specific thing. When I found that Gray Puxen was hiring, I did a bunch of research into the company, and I realized that, yeah, it's like small enough where you can, show your interest in something and they will work towards you wanting to do what you want to do. But at the same time, I feel like our clients love us, and it's just a growing thing where they're just happy to pop us onto more projects. So yeah, I'm just happy. I love this job. I love Gray Puxen.
Earlier in the show, you kind of talked to us about all of the things that your role as a digital practice manager touches. Can we dig a little bit more into that? Maybe what does your day-to-day really look like, and how do you
Sure.
begin to even think about managing all of that?
Yeah, true. I looked at a lot of coffee, first and foremost. A lot of coffee and a lot of exercise just to balance out your life. Look, I suppose that the big thing is strategy, right? We never want to be, and I say we, the global we, never want to be so sort of short-sighted or blinkered to say, like, we just need to focus on getting stuff out this week. We need to be thinking much bigger. And look, there's people that are really good at that. Some people, that's a challenge to sort of think that far ahead. We don't want to think too far ahead, but we need to sort of plan for success in the near-term future. So we always sort of go with a 3-year strategy. So for me, and it's really timely, we're sort of preparing that now. It's sitting down and looking at, well, there's been a lot of talk about AI, and it's sort of come and gone and peaked and troughed, but it seems like it's having a bit of a second wind at the moment. And how is that really going to convert and maybe affect the design industry? Automation is just an ever-increasing tool that is going to make an impact. Day to day, I suppose my role is almost making sure that we don't scare people with those sorts of things. It's really interesting. A lot of people say, oh my God, like, I actually had a partner the other day say, we need to get rid of you before you get rid of us. And we sort of had a bit of a laugh about it. But it's making sure that you take every single person, whether they are the managing partner or a graduate, or an architect, or an interior designer, on that same journey and sort of cater for their different learning speed. So day to day, it is working with IT to make sure that our hardware is up and running and it's efficient, and we've got laptops on order and all these sorts of things during a laptop crisis worldwide, or a hardware crisis. It's also then making sure that on the flip side with our projects, hey, we have a really big data deliverable on this project. Are the design technology team across that? Are they sort of managing that? So it's sort of, I spend a lot of time jumping between those two camps. And also, I suppose the third sort of camp I like to say is just that people camp as well. You want to make sure that you're still tapping into people's emotions and not just driving them with technology. I think technology really makes people tired at times. Even myself, I find sometimes when I leave the office and get on the bus, I can't look at my phone, or I can't look at another screen for a few minutes. So making sure that we just don't overload people with too much. It's just a balancing act.
I think that's a good point. And I feel like a bit of the subplot on this is really exploring the idea of, having a focused group and a leader around technology. It's not something that firms needed, not too long ago. But now I feel like there's kind of a really serious demand on everybody's work operations that requires that. So
Yeah.
whether it's being outsourced or it's something that you build in-house, you need people who are leading and thinking about the technology of the practice.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's where I work, so I wholeheartedly agree. I'm a little bit biased, but no, look, I do agree. I think there's so, like, when I look at a project in any one of our studios, it's using, and let's speak really broadly, it's probably using 20 to 30 different softwares to deliver that, and that might be Adobe through to Revit through to Rhino, SketchUp, like a OneDrive or whatever it might be to transfer information. Who's managing all of that? Who's educating people on that? Who's supporting those platforms? And also, who's strategizing where those platforms are in 12 months, 24 months' time? And I think you're right. I think once upon a time, you didn't need to have that role. It was sort of, you sort of turn up and use your computer and sort of the IT guys take care of it. But even from design, technology, and IT, those two strategies need to talk to each other simultaneously to really get the most out of, or the most benefit for a practice.
I also want to talk about the scale, because you're doing it at a pretty large scale. You're looking at a team of, you said it's 150, and you guys are off across multiple locations. So that adds to the complexity. What does that look like in terms of that reach?
Oh, look, it's really tricky. So I would say Melbourne's our bigger studio. So Victoria, there's about, I would say, sort of 70 design-based staff down there. I'm based in New South Wales. So it's tricky sometimes to get the support down there. We're actually looking for a design technology specialist in that studio, because what happens is with no visible leadership in terms of training, support, whatever it might be for technology, and because the industry is so busy and your design deadlines never stop, right? It's sort of, sometimes you will find projects just fall back into that, hey, just do whatever you need to do to get it done, and we will get out of here at 4:00 for a Friday afternoon drink or whatever it might be. And before you know it, those shortcuts become, in inverted commas, efficiencies. And then before you know it, you're sort of maybe negatively impacting a project deliverable. So there's definitely complexity in terms of that scale. In terms of having team members in every studio, I've come to learn in my sort of short 15-year career, personality is key. You can teach anyone software skills and technology skills, but in a technology role as a trainer, you've got to have that right personality to be able to have someone come to you at 4:55 on a Friday afternoon, absolutely almost on the verge of tears, and you've got to be able to talk them down and calm them down and say, hey, we'll fix it. We'll get your deadline sorted. It's okay. So soft skills, I think, in a technology environment are just absolutely paramount.
I think a lot of people would find that last sentence pretty interesting, with the shift to soft skills.
Yeah.
Especially on the technology side. It's not something that, I mean, it's something that you often talk about from a people management side, but the technology later and the soft skills is really interesting.
Look, it took me a long time at the start of my career to understand that soft skills side. I was like, what do you mean soft skills? Like, this is what I do. I work with technology, but it's about how you interact with every person you come across, right? And what's the lasting impression you leave with them when you've sort of helped them along their way in terms of what they were needing to do. I think, yeah, I fell into that trap early on where I was like, oh, soft skills, no, that don't really matter. Whereas I suppose coming out of COVID, there's been such a focus on mental health, soft skills. I'm converted. Soft skills are everything.
So moving on back over to Christina, and as a younger person in the field who is a lot of people would say, still has a lot to learn.
That's an understatement.
So what are important areas, or what are areas that you feel that you need the most support, especially if you think back to the first, 2-3 months that you had at Grey Pucksand?
When it comes to being a grad, like, reality is you do get a lot of the documentation side of the job. So I am very much lucky to, work at GP where, we have a really good team to help support us in that. But just in general, like I feel like as a grad, your abilities to adapt to from like what you've learned at uni as opposed to in an actual legitimate firm is like vastly different. So I think like coming from university where you're able to, I don't know, do assignments and do certain things that are like according to your design, like your own thinking, whatever that may be, coming into a firm where you have a legitimate client and things change and they want deadlines now and certain things like that. So coming into a firm, you're just kind of in an environment where you are meant to adapt and learn really, really quickly in most of your projects.
Yeah, I was curious, and both of you can chime in on this, but what are some of the typical areas that you are often seeing your team coming for support, especially related to technology?
It's an interesting one. I think it's normally around the software that we're using to deliver projects. So it's really funny. We've been talking, or I've been talking with a few colleagues and just people in the industry around digital natives versus digital immigrants, and we're getting these guys and girls coming in from I know that sounds really like basically it's people that grew up in analog era versus Spotify era, right? And it's funny, like even some of these guys and girls that are coming in from universities and colleges and education sort of institutes, they can do amazing things with technology, but some of the basic underlying principles are not taught. So I think where we're seeing at the moment is they've got this really good design knowledge and they've been taught design principles really well, but in terms of actually getting that sort of maybe out of their head onto paper or into a software, that's probably where it's falling down a little bit. And I think that's probably just a symptom of the industry's moved so far with major platforms like your Revits or your SketchUps or whatever they might be, that they've got in-house practices, best industry user guidelines, and all these different ways of doing things. You can't possibly expect a graduate to learn every which way and every platform before they enter the industry.
I totally agree. It's interesting because we just interviewed Slantis, which they're a technology company that is very focused on similar conversations around skill building and using Revit and documentation. And we had a similar discussion about this learning gap that happens when you come out and you start your career, and it clashes with the demand of the industry really dramatically.
Yep.
Like the idea of the practitioner is that we've got a deadline, we got to get it done, it needs to be accurate. We'll try to teach you, but we also need you to run with us while we try to deliver this project.
Yep.
And I think for the new graduate or even people who may have left practicing and are coming back to it, there might be a learning curve that you have to go through. And so I wanted to talk to you both about how do you address that learning curve? And Christina, maybe you can start by telling us so far, like from your experience, what have been helpful things that have happened that have helped you kind of address that learning curve?
Well, I feel like for me, I'm quite lucky in terms of I went to a design college that was actually quite progressive. They changed their curriculum quite a lot to adapt to just industry standards. Like I have a lot of friends who did architecture at quite like, I would say like well-renowned like universities in Australia, and none of them really had the skill that I had once I graduated, because my college was so they just considered that a priority to adapt and to teach us the industry standards at the moment. So I think coming into a firm, even though I would say I learned a little bit more than the average, architect leaving, I don't know, like University of Sydney or whatnot, it's still like I feel like you come into a firm, everyone's running towards a deadline, and I'm merely learning how to walk. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you just get this shock, and they pop you onto a project, and everyone's still like working towards this thing, and you're just like, what is going on? I'm genuinely confused. But again, like the support that you have from people around you is what helps you move forward. And yeah, for sure. That's kind of my experience in the last couple months.
And I definitely see that as well. Like, I think I've been thinking about this sort of term, like productively curious. And I feel like you get these grads that turn up starry eyed into a practice and it's like running into a brick wall at 20 kilometers an hour. It's like, no, we don't need your curiosity. We need you to deliver. And I think that's, I kind of think that's a bit unfair because it's sort of like all these skills that you've amassed and that you're starting to learn right at the start of your career. And then it's sort of like, no, we need you to just jump in here and just churn. Like, I think that's, if we start going off track, I think that's what starts to lead towards like a brain drain out of the industry and why you get people leaving to go to prop tech companies and to startups and things like that. I think we really need to show a bit more care for people entering the industry or re-entering the industry as well, that might have been out. We recently had someone that came back after sort of a 10-year breakout. And I think we don't show enough, not caution's the wrong word, care around these people and say, hey, things have actually changed a fair bit while you've been studying or while you've been away, and we want to support you getting up to speed. I think more often than not, and I think, Christina, you might be able to sort of chime in here as well. I think when we have new starters, for example, I sit down with them and give them a pretty in-depth induction around our systems and our platforms and so on. And then straight away they're put onto a project and it's like, see you later, you're off and running. And it's like, hang on, like, what's the project? What's the value? How much fee have we got for this stage? Like, it's just straight into it. And I think that elevates the stress and sort of takes the shine off it. Yeah, pulls the rose-tinted glasses off fairly early.
100%.
But it seems like in your studio that James is someone you guys can go to ask questions. Have you tapped into using him as a resource?
Oh, all the time. I would just randomly call James and be like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And yeah, we know that he'll always be there. And there is a team behind him as well. Like, I feel like there's always someone that we can call out to if one person is busy, because I assume James is on a ton of different meetings and also everyone else is trying to contact him as well. So yeah, it's very much helpful to have a team behind him.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about this conversation is, for me, it almost, and this is a little bit off topic, but it almost goes back to this business model of we need people to fill billable hours, and the pipeline is so full and we're busy. And then somewhere in there, everyone's like, oh, but architects, we run off an apprenticeship model of like teaching and learning. And those two things just don't work in the contemporary context anymore. So I don't know. I'm almost wondering to myself out loud, when you onboard a new person, you should, set aside at least an X percentage amount of their time to overhead to actually help make them more successful at the end of their first year by setting them up successfully and taking that time rather than just throwing them in.
Agreed. I think there's still a mind shift or a mindset shift that needs to take place there, because it's straight away, you're absolutely right. As soon as you get in the door, bang, your billable hours. And I think that's where we sort of, the industry falls down a little bit, is we've got to accept a little bit of overhead to make people feel more comfortable in the environment, feel ready to tackle a project with a certain software or whatever it might be. And I think, again, as well, even having that sort of, having a team where it's like we've got people that will put their hand up. As I was saying sort of earlier, if you put your hand up and you want to help out on something, we're incredibly supportive. We need people to build content and build furniture for some of our renders, and people will put their hands up and they're like, sometimes the practice will be like, oh, but where does that time go? I'm like, stop, guys, we need to not have this conversation. Like, that chair will be used 50 more times afterwards or 100 more times afterwards. Just give me an hour of non-billable for it now. It's that mind shift is so deeply ingrained in our industry that it's billable hours or bust, and I think it really needs to shift away from that.
So I wanted to dive into that more and ask you, James, like, what's your vision for how the architecture firm can fill that role in terms of providing education to people and in order to help the project actually be more successful, not just as a drain on non-billable time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so non-billable time. Everything I try to do, I try to be as efficient as possible. So what we do, and as Christina pointed out, I might have people turn up to my desk and ask me a question, or give me a call on Teams if I'm sort of not in the studio. But what we do is we make sure that we have several platforms and a bunch of information around the practice available at the click of a button, essentially. So we, much like sort of any other practice, we have sort of a central intranet where there is a ton of every training recording I've ever run, how to use OneDrive, how to start a new project in Revit, how to link Rhino to Revit. All those sorts of things are recorded and put up there, and people can watch them in their own time, wherever they might be. We have a bunch of documents as well. So I think going back to that sort of soft skill conversation, you have to understand you have to understand that people learn differently in different ways and at different speeds. So whilst one person might love to sit there and read a step-by-step instructional guide with images, someone else just wants to jump onto a video and be able to fast forward and backtrack and go forwards and whatever it is. So having all of those different mediums there might be online courses. Like we've built courses based off YouTube channels or LinkedIn Learning, all these different platforms. You've got to cater to everyone. I mean, there's a mountain of work there, but once you put that foundation in, you can sort of point people to the right direction and say, hey, go check out this video or go read this guide. And at the end of it, come back and ask me a question if you still need support. You never want to take the personal side out of it. As much as I love to talk about technology, you still like to be a person and be able to say, hey, come and talk to me. Don't just go off into the ether. You want to make sure that people still feel they've got your support as a person, and you're not just going to direct them to a YouTube channel every time they have a question.
What do you think is most challenging about teaching technology skills to architects and designers?
For me, it's probably the breadth of content that we have to teach, how much we have to teach it, and just the audience size, right? Whenever I work with design technology specialists on my team, I always sort of remind them, you are going to have to train on this one topic 50 times, and you're going to have to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, all with a smile on your face, because it's not going to be relevant to everyone at the same time. Like Christina might be working on like a computational script for a facade earlier in the year, in January, but another person in another studio might be doing the same thing in December, 12 months later. You're going to have to support both of those people on exactly the same workflow, but just months apart. And you might tap into Christina or someone that's done it in the past and say, hey, can I link you up with this person? They're going through a similar sort of issue. But I think what sort of maybe keeps me awake at night is just, I would love a breather. I would love like all of these technology companies to be like, we're going to take a year off so everyone can catch up and all the software developers to just stop. Because there's just, I mean, learning never stops, right? You will learn whether you're a graduate coming into the practice this week or whether you are returning to industry after a 10-year break or 20-year break. There's always something to learn, and I suppose it's just how do you keep that momentum, but also how do you not hit saturation point? That's also something I'm really, really critical of. I always cringe when I have to send like an all company email, because I'm just like, oh God, I'm sure that's just going straight to someone's trash and they're not going to read it. And like rightly so sometimes. It's just like, we want to stop. We don't want to hear any more about technology, but I don't know, how do you keep that education going, but at a healthy level? It's tricky.
So what I'm hearing you say, James, is you don't like the fact that all these companies move to SaaS model and you want them back on DVDs that you download or like CDs that you get like every once a year.
No, don't worry. I love SaaS. I love the SaaS model, but it's just, yeah. When as we touched on earlier, when you're using 20 or 30 different softwares to deliver over the life of a project, and that might be sort of like different script packages in Grasshopper or different add-ins in Revit. There's just so much training content that goes into that, and so much support. And I think that's probably where I've had discussions in the past with firms I've worked for, and even Grey Puxan. Like, you could easily employ someone 5 days a week just purely on training, nothing else. But I mean, that overhead conversation again rears its head. So it's, yeah, it's incredibly tricky to balance. And then I suppose with all those software companies that do release product updates, 4 or 5 updates a year, like it's never ending. It's fun, but it's never ending.
Christina, is there anything? So obviously, you said you had a very kind of you were happy with uni and where it led you to, but is there anything that you wish uni would have prepared you better for?
I feel like, well, I know for me, my experience at uni was quite good. I think there's definitely with I have a lot of friends who did architecture and interior design and stuff, and they haven't had the best experience themselves. But a lot of that is genuinely because they feel like they are not prepared. Because I feel like uni is really good at preparing you to think conceptually, the design thinking, everything that you feel like you're going to do on the job. But reality is when you work, it's different. So yeah, I think uni in preparing us to like have that technical knowledge. I know a lot of unis that still use Rhino and use SketchUp just to get that knowledge going technically. But yeah, when we were doing like Revit at uni, that was definitely very, very helpful. Even like, because when I was at Billy Blue, we were doing like Enscape. So things that people are using in the industry is very much what I enjoyed the most. And yeah, I think it's just like the reality of uni and then coming into a firm for sure is something that I think is important.
I have a question for both of you, but like kind of different for both of your perspectives in the firm. So, James, I'm curious, what recommendations would you have to architects and designers who are facing that continuous technology learning wall or curve or whatever? I don't know what metaphor comes to mind for you, and how to manage that in addition to their deadlines. And then, Christina, what advice would you give to people who are managing people at your level in terms of helping to improve their learning experience in the firm as they're on these really tough deadlines?
I would just urge people to be productively curious, right? Not everyone wants to be involved in knowing the latest technology trends and all these sorts of things. Like some people just love design, and that's perfectly okay. Some people love interior, some people love architecture, some people love technology. But I think it's coming together and understanding the different perspectives of those groups. So I think instead of just having your technology team just sort of saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, be a little bit more curious and say, well, actually, you know what, like, what can I do differently on my next project that might be a bit more efficient? I don't think I'm just trying to think, I don't think I've ever really seen like a lessons learned sort of scenario ever work really well. I feel like we're, and I just say again, the general we are sort of really bad at looking back and saying, well, actually, what did and didn't work well on that project? I feel like we sort of are too busy. There's another deadline and we're on to another project, and there's no time to really take stock and say, hey, how can we actually deliver that more effectively? Or how can we use a different software to be more efficient, or whatever it might be? So I think, yeah, just invest in yourself, invest in your own learning as well. There's always there'll always be a team of people there to support you, and I suppose one of the mantras I try to live by is try not to, like, I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room, because otherwise I'm not learning anything. So make sure you reach out to those people around you that know way more than you do, and just soak it up in whatever time you have.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like with grads, I think I feel like I'm speaking for all the grads in the world right now, but generally, like if a manager or someone above us is just patient, I think that's the most important thing. We were talking about, like earlier, we were talking about like a grad coming in and it's like everyone else is running. The fact is that a thing for a grad would usually take a little bit longer than it would for a mid-level or even a junior. So I think just patience from us. We're all still learning. I think it's also a thing for a grad to do is to just be adaptable to everything. People will come up to you and you know that they're being legitimate, they're being supportive, and sometimes the harsh words are actually a good thing. I actually had a mentor here at GP kind of be like, look, I know you came into the firm thinking you're going to design everything, but reality is we need you on schedules. So that's just something that you feel like it's something that you come into a firm and you're like, okay, I have to adapt. Everyone here is really nice, and I know they want what's best for me, and their patience actually helps me move forward instead of freak out and burn out from all the things that I learned in my first week.
Yeah, I do think, practice. I think practices really have to nurture that mentality and nurture those grads to help them grow. And not just grads, nurture anyone. Everyone is learning, no matter whether you've been in a practice for 1 week or 10 years. I think practices really have to think about what is their approach to learning and development, because more often than not, I think when push comes to shove, maybe those sorts of budgets are the first things to maybe get cut or maybe go on hold, or especially when there are big projects that come in or deadlines, of course, learning and development goes on hold. But I think that's for me personally, that's a really important part of a culture, and probably that's what attracted me 3 years ago to Grey Park Sand. Their focus on learning and development, and hey, if you put your hand up, we will absolutely support you in what you want to learn.
James, I feel like you and I had some really good conversations offline about the future of practice, and I just want to tap into any additional thoughts that you wanted to share with us about things that you're getting excited about. What are you trying to work towards?
Yeah, how much time have you got? It's there's I don't know. I feel like there's so much out there. We have to be sort of very targeted in what we're approaching. I mean, look, personally, I'm really excited about the artificial intelligence stuff that's happening. I feel like that's gathering momentum again. I'm really interested to see how architects start adapting towards that. Look, generative design gets a bit of a bashing in the media in terms of sort of how it works and what it's actually putting forward. I've seen these studies where they're just like, oh, look, we took a park bench and applied generative design, and it just looks crazy, and it looks like it's using 10 times more material than what it actually needs. So I'm interested to see where that goes over the next few years. I know there's a lot of work out there in terms of just how they're sort of placing buildings on site and maximizing constraints and automating those sorts of things. So I think probably the biggest thing I'm excited about is the AI. But in terms of calling it artificial intelligence, I'd probably step back and call it augmented intelligence, because I really am excited about seeing designers work with computers and technology more to get much more efficiency out of their projects. Automation is always exciting. I feel like if we can make any of the processes, if we can remove 5 mouse clicks from a process for our designers on projects, that's a huge win. I think automation will continue to be of focus, just as fees and margins stay low and as there's sort of shortages and things on site. Yeah, I think automation and AI would be the 2 big things that I'm excited about and that we're sort of looking towards as a practice, and how that's going to impact us. I'd rather be ahead of it than trying to catch up. And I think actually the other one would be sustainability. I think even Christina and I were talking about that the other day. Like, are we even? I think I mentioned embodied carbon to someone in the office the other day, and they were like, "What's that?" And that just sort of, in a nutshell, sort of just rounded out my thinking of like, wow, like are we talking about this enough? Like, material selection, is that even sort of a discussion and around embodied carbon and sustainability at a education level, right through to practice? How are we really equipping our businesses today to make sure there's an industry tomorrow to work in? That's something that I'm excited about and working for.
I want to twist the question a little bit, but then throw it back out to Christina to say, what are you most excited about in terms of the future of your career in this profession?
I mean, I'm happy with any project that gets thrown at me, but I think just seeing how the industry is like constantly changing. And again, like as James was saying, we were talking about sustainability as a factor. That's just, there's so much in that that I feel like I could learn, and everyone could really learn about. And I think the industry is definitely going in that direction. So yeah, that's definitely one of the most exciting things about the industry that I really want to learn more about, get to know, like, again, the materials, how we can adapt our design to be more sustainable for the world and all that kind of stuff. I think as a grad, you just want to be part of it. So I think just putting my hand up and again, like, James, what were you saying? It was like
Productively curious.
productively curious. I want to be productively curious in anything that I do. So yeah.
I guess I'm also wondering, just like any recommendations on the technology front. I mean, there's so many different tools and resources out there. Is there a technology stack that you're really excited about, or do you not have like bias against different technology?
No, look, I mean, look, we are. I try to position ourselves or myself as platform agnostic. So I try to, yeah, treat everything equally. I mean, that's part of R&D and bringing new technology in, right? I might have a favorite, but I always try to step back and be like, right, there's 3 here. We need to evaluate all of these. So look, right now there's nothing I'm sort of really looking at in terms of bringing in, but there's a lot happening out there. There's rumblings on Twitter about Revit replacements and all this crazy sort of talk. And I'm like, don't get excited, don't get excited, don't get excited. So I don't know. Sometimes I sort of am in one of those little sit back moments where I'm just sitting back to see what happens, because I feel like the next maybe 24 months, there could be some really big shifts start to take place. So I'm just sort of, keeping an eye out and seeing what's happening and making sure we're ready to jump when we need to.
Interesting. Yeah. Revit replacement, that triggers a lot of thoughts.
Oh, I'm sure it will. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I personally don't know how that will, what will happen there, how it will happen, if it will happen. But there's talk out there. I suppose that comes back to automation and things like that. There's a lot of platforms out there that are really pushing into different sectors or different parts of your design process. I don't think necessarily there'll be a Revit replacement, but I feel, and this is probably where the stress comes back in, I feel there will be more softwares for designers to use to deliver in a process.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, on that front, to me, and we talked about this earlier in the season, I've rarely met an architecture firm who fully utilizes the full capability of Revit.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there's a lot of inverse happening where there's actually people coming out with like lighter weight versions that architects need. So
Yeah.
that aren't as expensive as the entire suite, but then again, we're not using the entire the power of the software itself.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that comes back to this whole conversation around training and education. We have some people that are phenomenal in SketchUp and Rhino, and some people that are phenomenal in massing in Revit. So some of our projects are Revit from day one to day end. Some other projects actually go through that sort of multi-software approach or multi-platform approach. So I suppose it's a tricky one. I don't know. I'm just really interested to see what happens in the next few years, because I feel like and rightly so, I feel like some people hit sort of just technology exhaustion when it comes to what do you mean I've got to use another software to do this one task? Like, why can't I do it in this software? Or what do you mean I've got to do it for this project? You can sort of understand how it gets a bit frustrating for the industry to have to pick up and multi-tool. I mean, there is no one tool that does it all, but when you keep throwing tools at designers and there's another thing to learn, that saturation point for education becomes a critical factor.
Yeah, I feel that all the time. I guess to close out the conversation, I wanted to come back to any final thoughts you guys, either of you, have about best practices for elevating conversations on technology and mentorship and practice. I think one other last thought that we haven't really covered is this kind of push-pull between individual career growth and the project delivery. And I'm just wondering if there are any ideas that come to mind on how to kind of balance those two needs.
Look, I think for building out support, I think in my mind it's sort of twofold. I think it's incredibly important. Look, once your practice reaches a certain size and there are those conversations that start around having specific roles for design technology support, I think that's really important. And I think the biggest one, and we sort of touched on it before, is that I think practices really need to come into the conversation and support, not only support embedding design technology teams into practices, but support their use and how they work with designers. They've got to support designers in terms of their career growth. In terms of how you balance project delivery and career growth, I suppose that's the never-ending struggle, right? It's there's only so many hours in a day, and you always want to sort of take care of your self-learning, but there's also your work to do as well. I don't know. I think it's that's life balance, right? Yeah, I just think you've got to balance. I don't know. Personally, I try to have one day a week where I just sort of put a few hours aside to do my own learning and development, and then the rest of the time is sort of spent supporting other people's learning and development. I feel like if you don't carve out your own time, it'll get carved out for you on a project or on something else. So I think you've got to take care of the me to take care of the we.
Hi, Disruptors. If you like the content from today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast.
Be a part of the conversation by joining us, our speakers, and others in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is @practiceofarch. That's @practiceofarch. We love to hear from you. Drop us a note to say hello.
This show is part of Gable Media. You can learn more about other podcasts and video channels in our community by visiting gablmedia.com.
Thank you for joining us on Practice Disrupted, a podcast by Practice of Architecture. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.